The gym smelled of BBQ sauce and polish as laughter broke across the reunion floor, stinging sharper than any insult. I'm Gideon Hale, in my 50s, a facilities director. My cane gleamed under the spotlight while the crowd looked away. What would you have done in my place? The laughter caught me before I'd taken 3 steps into the reunion hall. It was brittle, like glass cracking along a seam, and it came from the corner where the old football captains held court. My cane pressed a polite tap against the polished gym floor, announcing me in a way I never asked for. The balloon arch wheezed as the heating unit blew, and I told myself I was imagining things. But the sound traveled first a chuckle, then a ripple, and I felt it land on my shoulders. The high school gym had been dressed in its Sunday best folding tables under polyester cloth banners in loopy print welcoming us back. The smell was a tug-of-war between barbecue sauce from the buffet and lemony floor polish. I signed in at the front table, and a volunteer I didn't know slapped a sticker on my chest. The edge tugged skin through my shirt. Gideon Rourke, it read. 2 letters off, but enough to feel like erasure. She smiled, already moving on. Ellis spotted me near the bleachers. He always had the rescue dog energy back then and now. You made it, he said, hugging me quick, then eyeing the tag. Not even close to your name. Budget cuts, I muttered. His eyes shifted. Caleb's here. Of course he was. Caleb Dunn had the mic, the spotlight, and the same posture of ownership he'd carried since senior year. Tan in November, voice confident in the way only practiced ease can be. He caught sight of me, paused, and then let his smile sharpen. He raised his plastic flute. Good to see you standing, Rourke. The men around him laughed sharp as forks on plates. He didn't wait for me to answer. He looked down at my cane, then back up, enjoying the pause. Some of us peaked in high school, he announced loud enough for the DJ to ride down the track. The line earned obedient chuckles. Ellis leaned close. Ignore him. I said, fingers tightening around the wood. Smooth, newly polished, it felt solid enough. I let my thumb trace the grain where it curved toward the handle. I wondered if it would stay whole. We took our seats at the table no one claimed. The air was humid with the smell of cheap wine and reheated brisket. A slideshow projected against the far wall, senior photos dissolving into present-day smiles. Names scrolled at the bottom, a few with "In Memoriam." My name never appeared, though I'd submitted mine weeks ago. I tried not to notice. Caleb's voice kept threading through the noise. He emceed like the role was invented for him. Jokes about hairlines, jokes about PTA bills. Then, with a tilt of his glass toward my table, and here's to those who showed up. Really showed up. Eyes slid sideways, napkins pressed lips. The laughter was softer this time, but it was sharper for it. Ellis pushed back his chair, half standing. To the ones who hold things together, he said, voice cracked but loyal. A few clapped awkwardly. Caleb turned his grin into the microphone, especially them, and the room followed his cue. The sound landed like a spotlight. My cane lay across my lap, the rubber tip marking my slacks. I adjusted it, buying time. The tag itched above my heart-wrong letters, grinding every breath. The chatter and the clink of glasses surged again, as if the toast had been the real entertainment all along. Ellis looked at me, searching. You okay? I nodded, though my throat was dry. Good wasn't the word. I kept my eyes on the cane, letting the light gloss off it until it seemed to glow. I thought about the first dent it might take the crack waiting in the wood. I drew in a slow breath. shallow enough no one would hear, and made a vow too quiet to toast. This isn't the end. Not tonight. I sat alone at a corner table in the bar across from the gym, the cane balanced neatly across my knees like a fragile truce. The after-party had spilled here in its usual rhythm. Same jukebox, same neon beer signs buzzing faintly, same sticky floor tiles that had seen 3 decades of spilled pitchers. My glass of seltzer fizzed weakly, the bubbles rising slower than my pulse. Julia spotted me before I could shift away. She had been in theater back then, always ready with a line. Tonight she wore it in her smile wide and concerned, but rehearsed. "Gideon," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You were so brave coming tonight." Brave was the word you used for children at the dentist, not men in their 50s carrying canes. Her hand grazed mine featherlight. "Ignore Caleb? Caleb." The pause was a kindness she wanted credit for. I managed a nod, scanning the room. Everyone else was gathered in clusters, their laughter carried by the bar's low ceiling. I heard the thud of pool balls, the crack of the cue, the jukebox changing tracks with a sigh. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know people respect you for showing up. It says a lot." Respect didn't look like the pity in her eyes, or the way she kept glancing at my cane as though it were a conversation piece. I wanted to believe her, but the word respect felt flimsy, like the paper coaster under my glass curling at the edges. Then a camera flash. Quick, sharp. I flinched. A young guy with an alumni badge slung around his neck lowered his phone, already turning away. Julia laughed softly. "Candid shots, I guess. You'll thank me when you see how kind you looked." I didn't feel kind. I felt pinned like an insect in a high school science display, my cane cutting diagonally across the frame. The smell of stale beer thickened. The neon sign hummed louder. Julia excused herself when someone waved her over. Her hand squeezed my shoulder, warm but detached, the way you touch someone you don't plan to call again. 3 days later, the alumni newsletter landed in my mailbox, folded crisp. I opened it at the kitchen counter, the smell of ink and cheap paper rising like dust. There it was, front page, a photo of me at that corner table, cane angled awkwardly like a misplaced prop. The caption read, "Some of us never change, class of '89 spirit still alive." The exclamation mark mocked more than any insult could. The picture was worse than I remembered. My shoulders hunched. My eyes caught mid-blink. Julia sat just out of focus, smiling toward the camera. It looked staged, a tableau of charity. The cane gleamed under neon like an emblem of smallness. By evening, the phone buzzed with messages. My sister texted a wry nice cameo. A colleague forwarded it with, "Saw you made the news," followed by 3 laugh emojis. My inbox held a copy too, the alumni office cheerfully inviting donations. The shame traveled faster than I could brace for it. I sat at the dining table, the newsletter spread flat. My thumb pressed against the ink until it smudged, leaving black dust on the skin. The sound of the refrigerator cycling filled the silence, each hum a reminder of the emptiness. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. I felt the chair tilt back with each shallow breath, as though the whole room leaned against me. Ellis called once, voice uncertain on voicemail. "Don't let it get to you." But the words felt thin when set against printed paper, against the permanence of circulation. The newsletter had already gone out to 3,000 households. Former teachers, distant cousins, retired, coaches, all of them would see me reduced to a caption joke. I whispered into the empty kitchen, the words tasting metallic. Maybe they're right. The cane rested across my lap, steady but heavier than before. Maybe I should vanish. The room didn't argue. The ink bled faintly into the fibers of the page, as though even the paper wanted to erase me. The diner smelled like it always had bacon grease that never left the walls, coffee burnt just enough to remind you it was cheap, and the faint sweetness of syrup clinging to the vinyl booths. I slid into one near the back. Kane leaned against the seat, steam from my mug curling upward like a tired prayer. That was when I heard it. A baritone calm and measured rolling from the next booth over. "The trick is, you endure," the voice said, not loud, just steady enough to cut through the chatter of forks and plates. I turned slightly. The man was older, his posture too straight for his age. White hair, cropped close, jacket plain but clean. On the wall above him, black and white photos of men in uniform stared out. He noticed my glance and gave a small nod, the kind that didn't intrude. Gideon Rourke. He asked, his tone more statement than question. I blinked. "Yes, I knew your father," he said. "Served alongside him in the reserves back in '78. I was a lieutenant then. He saved my unit more than once with his damn meticulous reports." He chuckled, sipping his coffee. "I don't forget that name." I stared at the steam rising between us. Funny. Most people at the reunion forgot it just fine. My voice cracked more than I wanted. He set down his mug. His eyes were steady, not pitying, not prying, just listening. So I let the words out. About Caleb's toast, about the photo in the alumni newsletter, about the phone calls, the messages, the sudden sense that the past 20 years could be distilled into a single cruel caption. I expected judgment, or worse, advice disguised as sympathy. Instead, he leaned back, arms folded, nodding just once at the right pauses. The clatter of the diner filled the spaces. Orders shouted laughter, the squeak of shoes on tile. When I ran out of words, the silence felt heavier than the venting. He finally spoke. "Honor isn't applause," he said. "It's endurance. You know that." Something in me bristled. Feels like endurance is just another word for losing quietly. "Not if you're still standing," he said, gaze fixed, voice even. "Not if you haven't let them decide who you are. Endurance is the long game, son. The only one worth playing." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, folded card. The paper was worn at the edges, the kind you keep close. He slid it across the table. "Keep this. Read it when the noise gets too loud." I opened it. In firm, slanted script, honor isn't applause, it's endurance. His palm, rough from years I couldn't map, closed over mine as I held it. The grip was firm, not crushing, just anchoring. A weight transferred without words. I felt my chest unclench in a way it hadn't since that night in the gym. He finished his coffee, stood, and before leaving gave a salute. Casual, almost offhand, but exact. Sharp wrist, steady hand, no doubt about the intent. A salute not to a flag, not to a room, but aimed directly at me. It hit harder than Caleb's laughter ever could. I pocketed the card, slid a few bills under my plate, and stepped into the night. The Ohio air bit my cheeks cold and raw, but my pulse ran steadier. The cane clicked against the sidewalk, no longer a spotlight, but a metronome measuring each step forward. The subject line glowed at the top of my inbox alumni board keynote: Caleb Dunn. The words pulsed against the gray screen like a taunt. I clicked anyway, though I knew what I'd find. Caleb's grin filled the header photo-polished teeth beneath a banner that read, "Honoring Our Legacy." The text below praised his commitment to community and his ongoing leadership, as though the man had written it himself. My name appeared once a footnote tucked into the last paragraph. Special thanks to alumni who continue to inspire us behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, 3 words neat enough to bury me. The lab hummed around me, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The copier rattled as it spat out grant proposals, the air carrying that warm smell of toner and chemical cleaner. I sat on a stool cane propped beside me, pretending to review circuit diagrams. But all I saw was Caleb's smile. My phone vibrated. Ellis's name lit the screen. I answered, trying to keep my voice even. "You saw it?" he asked without greeting. "Front and center." "Gid, you can't just take this. He's rewriting history with you watching." I stared at the cane. History doesn't ask my opinion. Ellis was silent for a beat. Then, "Stop hiding. You've got proof stories, witnesses. Don't wait until it's too late." I wanted to believe him, but the words felt fragile, the kind that dissolve when you actually lean on them. When I stood, my heel slipped on a patch of wet tile. My balance jerked weight, crashing onto the cane. There was a sharp crack, clean and brutal like a branch breaking in winter woods. I froze, staring down. A splinter ran jagged through the shaft, wood fibers exposed like bone beneath skin. My support had split. I held it anyway, palm rough against the tear, as if pressure alone could undo the break. The smell of disinfectant rose sharp, cutting the air, making my eyes sting. I carried the pieces into the restroom, the echo of each step doubled by the hollow acoustics. Under the fluorescent glare, I tried pressing the halves together. My thumbs dug into the break until wood dust clung to my skin. The fracture refused to vanish. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I remembered. Lines under the eyes' shoulders canted. The cane wasn't the only thing cracked. I thought of Caleb's voice amplified by applause, of the newsletter photo my cane angled like a punchline, of Ellis telling me to fight back. The micro-climax came not with a shout, but with silence. I set the cane against the sink, the split visible, and knew the old way of enduring had collapsed with it. Still, I gathered the pieces, slid them into my bag with care as though they were evidence. My hand lingered on the fractured grain fibers rough against my palm. "They'll see," I whispered. My voice barely stirred the hum of the lights, but it felt steadier than before. Midnight pressed against the windows, the Ohio winter wind rattling the frame with an uneven rhythm. In my home office, the only light came from the computer screen, pale blue washing across stacks of old folders. The heater clicked on and off each cycle, leaving a faint metallic smell, a reminder of age and maintenance deferred. I leaned forward, cane broken and stored in the corner like an artifact. On the desk lay alumni minutes printed on thin paper ink, fading at the edges, donation receipts creased and yellowed, a trail of money telling its own story. I scanned and tagged each file, the scanner's hum filling the silence. The smell of old books rose from the shelf beside me, mixing with dust and dry heat. Ellis was on the line, his voice low as if distance required whispering. "You're really doing this?" I didn't look up. Every email, every memo, every misplaced dollar. They buried me under paper. Now I'll return the favor. The cursor blinked on the screen like a pulse. I opened a folder labeled Ledger. Inside timestamps from 20 years of correspondence. Subject lines like Ghosts Board nominations, endowment, gifts, special recognition. I pieced them together, a jigsaw of omission and self-congratulation that spelled Caleb's ascent and my erasure. Ellis sighed. Once you send it, you can't pull it back. It'll burn everything. My fingers lingered over a worn envelope tucked between the files. My father's handwriting scrawled across it. I opened it, hearing his voice as though it were caught in the folds. Stand, don't beg. He had said it once when I came home from school, bloodied but silent. Endurance. He believed wasn't passive. It was holding the ground beneath your feet. The heater clicked again, a hollow note echoing through the quiet. I pulled the last document onto the scanner bed, minutes from a closed alumni session that named Caleb keynote, while my own candidacy vanished into scheduling conflicts. The glass plate was cool under my palm edges sharp. Ellis cleared his throat. You sure this is the hill? I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. No more hills. Just this. The evidence pack was complete PDFs lined in order, each stamped, each captioned. I opened the mail client, drafted a message not for one recipient, but for all alumni faculty donors. I attached the ledger. The final step waited in a small drop-down schedule send. The calendar widget blinked back at me. I chose the date of the next reunion, a night Caleb would stand at the podium confident. At the precise hour of his speech, my files would detonate in every inbox. The cursor hovered. Ellis's voice cracked the line again. Last chance, kid. I inhaled the room filled with the dry scent of paper and heat. My thumb pressed the mouse button. Scheduled. The confirmation box vanished, leaving silence heavier than any applause. The microclimax wasn't noise, it was the absence of retreat. I leaned back the chair, creaking. The heater clicked off. For a moment, the only sound was my own breath steady in the dark. Then the phone buzzed. A news alert glowed across the screen. Grand Alumni Summit announced keynote livestream worldwide. Caleb wasn't just speaking to a hall. He'd have cameras, headlines, an audience larger than any he'd dreamed of. I closed my eyes. Card from the Admiral still in my pocket, my father's words echoing louder than the wind. No way back now. The Alumni Summit lights burned hotter than I'd expected, heat pooling at the back of my neck. The stage gleamed under follow spots that scattered dust motes like glitter, each particle suspended, illuminated, and judged. Caleb stood at center stage, framed by twin banners, microphone in hand, smile calibrated for the camera's red eye. "Not everyone adapts to change," he said smoothly, voice amplified across the hall. "Some of us carry old grievances like relics." He paused, his eyes brushing over me in the audience, a flicker quick enough to look accidental. "And some cling to symbols for sympathy." Laughter rippled across the auditorium. It sounded polite, yet the sharp edge underneath was unmistakable. I shifted my cane across my knees, the polished surface catching light, making me complicit in the joke. The air carried a cocktail of faint cologne and the warm metallic tang of stage cables baking under hot lamps. My shirt clung at the collar. Somewhere in the rafters, the AC hummed steady and indifferent. A mic runner zigzagged through the rows, arms full of cables glancing over raised hands. Mine hovered halfway, a gesture I regretted instantly. He passed me without hesitation, nodding toward a cluster of Caleb's supporters instead. The live stream camera panned across the audience. My image flashed briefly onto the giant screen above the stage. In the corner of the projection chat, comments scrolled like ticker tape. "Stickman, milking it. Where's the violin?" Each phrase hit harder than the laughter, because it wasn't just the room now, it was everywhere. A permanent record archived with pixels and hashtags. Ellis shifted 2 rows behind me, leaning forward as if proximity could soften the blow. His lips formed silent words. "Hold steady." I rose anyway. Crossing the aisle, my cane clicked against the polished floor, each tap swallowed by the auditorium's low murmur. A side microphone waited on its thin stand. I reached it, steadied myself, and spoke. "Excuse me." The audio cut. A sharp feedback squeal split the air shrill enough to draw hands to ears. The AV crew scrambled at their board, toggling switches with studied confusion. My words were drowned in the whine, my mouth moving without sound. On the projection screen, my lips opened and closed like a silent film extra. Security eyes found me 2 men in dark blazers leaning forward at the edge of the wings. Their stares carried warning, sit down or escalate. I stepped back, jaw set, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a scene. The microphone stand felt cold as I released it, metal slick from nerves not my own. On stage, Caleb adjusted his tie, a master of timing. "Technical difficulties," he quipped. The hall rewarded him with chuckles again. He rode the moment like a current launching into a closing about resilience, about how true leaders rise above petty distractions. The ovation began even before his last word. A slow rise then, a tidal swell, alumni, donors, classmates clapping in unison. The sound filled the hall like a storm. Caleb bowed slightly gracious, bathed in light. I remained in the dark wing cane, trembling beneath my palm. The ovation's thunder pressed against my chest, an uninvited drumbeat. I imagined the live stream capturing every angle. Caleb triumphant me shadowed the story sealed in pixels. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration was subtle, yet electric. I slid it out, the glow of the timer icon bright against the screen. Scheduled message T1 minute. A shiver traveled through me, colder than the AC. For the first time all evening, I exhaled fully. My breath clouded the edge of my vision, though the air wasn't cold enough for frost. The ovation crested, then began to ebb. I stood unseen, cane pressed firm to the floor, waiting for silence. The projector flickered once, then steadied, humming with the faint smell of a hot bulb. At first I thought it was just another AV hiccup. Then, like synchronized bells, phones around the hall began chiming alerts, vibrations, the chorus of digital inboxes opening. On the giant screen behind Caleb, the first PDF bloomed, alumni board minutes text highlighted in yellow, my name crossed out in deliberations. Gasps rippled through the rows. Another file followed, donation receipts stamped with dates lines connecting contributions to Caleb's sudden rise. The paper programs in people's laps scraped noisily against their seats as hands tightened. Then the emails appeared. Subject lines stacked in incriminating order. Talking points minimize Gideon's presence. Alternate keynote suggestion. My classmates shifted uncomfortably, neon glow from their phones reflected in their eyes. Finally, a CCTV still from the bar. Julia's smile frozen as my cane angled awkwardly into frame timestamp intact. A moment once used for mockery, now a shard of evidence. Murmurs fell into a silence thick enough to feel. Caleb's voice cracked the stillness. This is clearly taken out of context. He reached for the mic, but a board member in the front row yanked the cord from his hand. The pop echoed final as a gavel strike. Caleb stammered, eyes darting to the exits like a man looking for an unlit door. I gripped the broken cane at my side, the crack still raw beneath my palm. Then movement stirred the silence. From mid-row, the Admiral rose. He didn't rush. He walked steady shoes tapping against the aisle shoulder's squared presence undeniable. The crowd parted without instruction. He reached me, halted, and with a precision that froze time, executed a crisp salute. The hall gasped softly, not for the gesture itself, but for its weight directed not at a stage, not at Caleb, but at me. My throat tightened. Then he extended something forward my hand, but not as it had been. The shaft was neatly splintered with a polished metal sleeve, the ferrule at its base refitted shiny. The wood still bore the scar of its crack, but now held firm. He placed it in my hand. The sleeve felt cool, smooth, sure. His voice carried microphone live from somewhere in the ceiling. Honor isn't applause, it's endurance. The silence broke, not in cheers, but in a collective standing. Chairs rustled, paper programs slipped the hall, rising together steady as one breath. On the live stream ticker, the hashtags flipped. Hashtag Stickman dissolved under new ones. Hash restored. Endurance. Honor. The board chair climbed onto the stage, glasses slipping down his nose. He cleared his throat, papers shaking. On behalf of the alumni board, I must state publicly, Gideon Hale's record stands untarnished. Attempts to diminish his service were unjust and unfounded. Effective immediately, his name is reinstated in full. The words weren't ornate. They didn't need to be. The air itself shifted the weight on my shoulders, loosening with each syllable. Cameras popped from every angle, shutters ticking like rainfall. The livestream caption bar carried the declaration across countless screens. Caleb shrank in the background, a man eclipsed not by anger, but by truth. The Admiral leaned close, his voice firm but private, though the microphones caught just enough. Now use this for someone else. His eyes locked on mine, not letting me confuse victory with vanity. The projector whined softly, the heat pressing against the back wall. I pressed my palm along the cool sleeve of the cane scar, and repair joined neither hidden nor erased. The hall held its silence, not roaring but steady. The sound of something broken made whole. The morning after the house was so quiet the click of the kettle shutting off sounded like punctuation. Steam curled from the spout into a sunbeam stretched across the laminate counter. The faint smell of lemon cleaner lingered from last night's half-hearted attempt at order, but the stack of unopened mail on the table told a truer story. The alumni board's apology had gone public at dawn, an email with the subject line, "Correction and Statement of Record." I read it once, then again, the words blunt and formal. Mr. Gideon Hale's service and standing are restored in full. Prior misstatements were unjust and regrettable. The relief was real, but sterile. On another screen, a press release confirmed Caleb's removal from the keynote circuit. Then my inbox pinged with one more message from him. We both did what we had to. No greeting, no apology. I archived it without reply. Some things required silence to stay buried. My son padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up shoulders hunched in the gray t-shirt he wore too often. He lingered at the doorway, then sat across from me, eyes fixed on the table's scuffed edge. I used to believe that newsletter he admitted, voice low. His thumb traced circles in the condensation ring from last night's glass. I thought maybe you were bitter, or making too much of it. I didn't know. His eyes lifted, wet but steady. How do you stand without applause? How do you not disappear? The kettle ticked as it cooled. I pushed a mug toward him, the steam carrying the sharp smell of cheap black tea. You plant your feet, I said slowly, and remember applause was never the measure. It's the standing itself. He nodded, silent. It wasn't resolution, but it was a beginning. Later that afternoon, the Admiral stopped by. His frame filled the doorway, sunlight haloing the edges of his uniform jacket. In his hand he carried a battered field notebook, its canvas cover scuffed corners frayed. He set it on the table between us. Blank pages, he said simply. Start listing who you'll mentor. His palm pressed the cover, then slid it toward me. Don't let this stop with you. His gaze was direct, steady, carrying the weight of all the unsaid years. When he left, I opened the notebook. The paper smelled faintly of dust and ink, ready to hold names that didn't yet exist. That night, Ellis came by with groceries. We cooked pasta, the sauce too thin, the noodles clumping together. Conversation stumbled at first, work, gossip, weather traffic, but gradually loosened. My son chimed in tentative, at first, then with small bursts of laughter. It arrived late, but when it did, it was real unforced, almost startling. The micro-climax was quiet, not a stage, not cameras, just my kitchen. I felt tears run for the first time in months, maybe years. They surprised me not loud, but steady cutting lines down my cheeks as I stared at the cluttered counter. The kettle ticked again, marking time. My son's hand landed on my shoulder, firm and warm, no words needed. After dinner, I sifted through the mail. Bills, flyers, the usual. Then one envelope stood apart, thicker paper embossed with the school district's seal. I slid it open with a butter knife. Proposal Alumni Mentorship Fund. Pending director appointment. The paper rasped beneath my fingers. The room for a moment stilled. The laughter, the kettle, the faint citrus scent all folded around me. The path ahead was there in ink and paper, a chance to take the restoration given to me and hand it outward. The bleachers groaned as people filed in the old high school gym repurposed with folding chairs and a makeshift stage. Box fans whirred in the corners, stirring the chalk dust that clung to the varnished floor. I stood at the rail cane, balanced loosely in my hand, not as a defense, but as a rhythm, a steady tap to mark the start of something new. The summer heat pressed against the windows, sunlight slanting into golden bars across the scuffed hardwood. On one side of the stage, a stack of cardboard boxes held application forms and a printed schedule of office hours. A modest bursary program was tucked inside, seeded by donations that arrived quietly without fanfare. This wasn't about me anymore. Ellis hovered near the sign-in table, ushering nervous teens toward clipboards. His grin was crooked, but proud. In the back row, the Admiral sat with arms folded, the brim of his cap shading his eyes. His presence was quiet ballast. I leaned into the mic, its metal cool against my palm. This fund isn't about erasing mistakes, I said. It's about endurance, borrowing strength until you find your own. My voice echoed lightly, caught in the rafters above the basketball hoop. A boy in a wrinkled polo raised his hand. What if you fail again? His voice cracked, part challenge, part fear. I smiled, not at him, but with him. You will, I answered simply. The trick isn't to avoid it. It's to keep showing up afterward. The fans hummed the sound, filling the pause like a long breath. Another girl notebook pressed to her chest asked, "How do you know when to start over?" I thought of late nights with receipts spread across my desk of the email schedule ticking toward detonation. "When standing still hurts worse than moving," I said. That's when. The questions kept coming about jobs rejection letters starting small. Each answer was plain stripped of speeches. I kept my hands open on the podium, letting the words be simple enough to stick. Midway through, I set the cane against the stage rail. The polished sleeve glinted no longer splintered wood, but joined metal solid. I stepped down to help Ellis shift chairs for a group circle. The cane stayed behind upright and steady, no longer a burden, but an emblem. My fingers closed instead around the rough metal of a chair leg, the scrape echoing as we stacked them. The weight felt good, useful, ordinary. When I looked up, the Admiral nodded once, a small gesture, yet as sharp as his salute months earlier. Ellis caught my arm, his eyes bright and squeezed. The warmth carried more than words. Then it came applause. Not thunderous, not forced. A warmth that rose in layers, filling the space like the slow swell of a hymn. I let it land, then lifted a hand not to claim it, but to redirect it toward the rows of students in front of me. "This isn't my story anymore," I said into the hush that followed. "It's yours. So let me ask you, whose endurance will you borrow until your own grows?" A murmur rippled. Pens scratched. The application box began to fill pages, bending under their own weight. Chalk scent hung in the air, fans droned, and for the first time the applause wasn't about survival. It was about beginning. I ran my thumb along the cane, the wood polished smooth, the metal sleeve cool beneath my hand, a reminder that even what's broken can stand tall again. Justice, I've learned, isn't revenge, but the quiet choice to keep dignity when the noise fades. Jobs end, trust shatters, family wounds linger, yet each loss can clear ground for something lasting. A local newsletter tucked in my mailbox this morning said simply, "Mentorship Fund opens applications already piling in." I smiled at the line and wondered whose endurance will you lean on until your own grows strong enough to pass along.